My name is Damon, and at 67 years old, I thought I'd seen everything during my 30 years as a police detective. That Tuesday afternoon changed everything. I stopped by Elite Cleaners to pick up my daughter-in-law Sarah's expensive coat as a favor. The elderly owner, Mr. Petrosky, who'd cleaned my uniforms for decades, grabbed my wrist with trembling hands. "Get the children out of the city tonight," he whispered urgently, his face pale. He produced a clear plastic bag from behind the counter. I found this sewn inside the lining. I looked inside and saw a small electronic device, fake passports, and $50,000 in cash. My blood turned ice cold. I sat in my truck outside Elite Cleaners for what felt like hours, but was probably only 10 minutes. My hands shook as I examined the contents of that plastic bag more carefully. The afternoon sun beat down through the windshield, but I felt cold all over. Those 30 years on the force had taught me to trust my instincts, and right now, every alarm bell in my head was screaming. The passports were expertly crafted, better than most forgeries I'd seen during my career. Each one showed Sarah's face, but with different names: Elena Volkov, Marie Dubois, Catherine Mills. The photographs were recent, taken within the last year, based on her hairstyle. My daughter-in-law, who baked cookies for church fundraisers and volunteered at the hospital reading to sick children, apparently had multiple identities. The electronic device was small, about the size of a car key fob, but sophisticated. Russian manufacturing marks were etched into the metal casing. I recognized it as a GPS tracker, but not any commercial model. This was military-grade equipment, the kind foreign intelligence services used. My stomach churned as I thought about my son Mark and my twin grandsons, Tommy and Billy, just 2 years old. A sudden buzzing made me jump. A burner phone I hadn't noticed was hidden deeper in the bag. The caller ID showed simply "Handler." My police training kicked in. I let it go to voicemail while I fumbled with my personal phone to record. After 4 rings, it stopped. Then came the automated voice message. A man spoke in accented English. "Package arrives tomorrow midnight. Confirm reception. You have 6 hours to respond, or we activate contingency." Contingency. In my experience, that word never meant anything good. I thought back to when Mark had introduced us to Sarah 3 years ago. She'd seemed perfect for him, maybe too perfect. After his difficult divorce from Jessica, Mark had sworn off dating. Then, he met Sarah at a medical conference where she was supposedly translating for foreign doctors. 6 months later, they were married. Helen and I had been thrilled when the twins arrived so quickly after. The sun was getting lower, casting long shadows across the parking lot. I needed to think to plan. But first, I had to understand what I was dealing with. I carefully unfolded a piece of paper I'd found tucked between the bills. My blood pressure spiked as I recognized Cyrillic script covering both sides. I couldn't read Russian, but I didn't need to. Detailed diagrams showed my house layout, Mark's work schedule at the defense contractor, the twins' daycare location, even Helen's weekly grocery shopping routine. Someone had been studying us for a long time. At the bottom of the page, written in English, were GPS coordinates and a single word: extraction. My mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. Sarah wasn't who she claimed to be. That much was obvious. But was she a spy? A sleeper agent, or something else entirely? And more importantly, what did she want with my family? The smart move would be to call Mark immediately, warn him about his wife. But something held me back. If Sarah was dangerous, confronting her directly might trigger whatever plan was in motion. Those twin boys were at daycare right now, vulnerable. Mark was at work, surrounded by classified defense projects. Helen was probably at home preparing dinner, completely unaware of the danger. I made a decision that went against every protocol I'd learned as a cop. Instead of calling for backup or alerting my family, I would investigate first. The hunter in me, dormant since retirement, stirred to life. If someone was targeting my family, I needed to know who, why, and how to stop them. The burner phone buzzed again. This time a text message. Confirm receipt, time sensitive. I powered off the phone and removed its battery. Let them wonder. As I started my truck, I thought about Mr. Petrosky's warning. The old Polish immigrant had fled Soviet oppression in the 70s. He knew danger when he saw it. The fact that he'd risked warning me meant this was serious. I drove home, taking a circuitous route, checking my mirrors constantly. No one followed. At every red light, I studied the evidence again. The money was all $100 bills, non-sequential serial numbers. Professional. The passports had entry stamps from various European countries dating back 2 years. Sarah had been traveling internationally without Mark's knowledge. My phone rang. Mark's name appeared on the screen. "Hey, Dad. Sarah mentioned you were picking up her coat. Did you get it?" I forced normalcy into my voice. "Just left the cleaner. Running a few errands before I head home." "Great. Hey, we're thinking of bringing the boys over this weekend. Helen mentioned wanting to take them to the zoo." The zoo. Such a normal grandfather thing to do. Take the grandkids to see elephants and giraffes, while their mother might be a foreign agent planning God knows what. "Sounds perfect, son. Looking forward to it." "You okay, Dad? You sound tired." Even over the phone, Mark could read me. He'd inherited that from his mother. I cleared my throat. "Just a long day. You know how retirement is busier than working sometimes." He laughed. "Tell me about it. Anyway, I've got a meeting. Thanks again for grabbing the coat." "No problem. Hey, Mark." "Yeah." "Tell Sarah I'll drop it off tomorrow. Want to visit with the boys anyway." "They'd love that. See you then, Dad." The call ended. Tomorrow. I had until tomorrow to figure out what Sarah was planning and how to protect my family without destroying it in the process. Because if I was wrong about this, if there was an innocent explanation, I'd be the grandfather who accused his daughter-in-law of being a spy based on some hidden items in a coat. But I wasn't wrong. Every instinct screamed danger. I pulled into my garage and sat there, engine off, gathering my thoughts. 30 years of police work had taught me that the first 48 hours of any investigation were crucial. I had less than 24 before that package, whatever it was, arrived at midnight tomorrow. Time to find out exactly who Sarah really was and why she'd infiltrated my family. I barely slept that night. Helen noticed my restlessness, but attributed it to the spicy dinner we'd had. I lay there staring at the ceiling, planning my next moves, while she slept peacefully beside me. By 5 in the morning, I gave up on sleep entirely. Going for an early walk. I whispered, kissing Helen's forehead. She murmured something about being careful and rolled over. If only she knew. I drove to Mark and Sarah's neighborhood and parked 3 blocks away. The pre-dawn darkness provided perfect cover as I positioned myself where I could watch their house. My old surveillance kit was still in the truck's lockbox binoculars camera, with telephoto lens, and the parabolic microphone I'd kept as a retirement memento. At 6:15, lights came on in the master bedroom. By 7, I watched Sarah emerge with the twins, buckling them into their car seats, with what appeared to be genuine maternal care. She kissed each boy on the forehead before closing the minivan doors. The normalcy of it all made my skin crawl. I followed at a distance as she dropped the twins at Little Shepherd's daycare. She chatted briefly with one of the teachers, laughed at something, then headed back to her vehicle. But instead of going home, or to her part-time job at the translation service, she drove east toward the industrial district. The morning traffic provided good cover as I tailed her. Sarah showed no signs of surveillance detection, no sudden turns or speed changes. Either she was very good at appearing oblivious, or she truly didn't expect to be followed. She pulled into an abandoned warehouse complex off Riverside Drive. I knew this area well from my police days. Empty buildings, no security cameras, perfect for criminal meetings. I parked behind a derelict shipping container and grabbed my equipment. 3 black SUVs were already there when Sarah arrived. She parked and walked confidently toward a side entrance. I crept closer, using rust-covered machinery as cover, until I could set up the parabolic microphone. The device was 20 years old, but still worked perfectly. Voices came through my headphones speaking Russian. Sarah's voice joined them, also in Russian fluid and native sounding. My daughter-in-law, who claimed to be from Minnesota, spoke like someone born in Moscow. I pressed record on my phone, capturing everything, even though I couldn't understand the words. Then, one of the men switched to English. The timeline accelerates. Moscow is impatient. I understand, Sarah replied in English now. But rushing risks exposure. The scientist trusts me completely. The scientist. They meant Mark. Trust is irrelevant, another voice said. We need the chemical defense formulas. Your husband's access is why you're here. 3 years I've been building this cover, Sarah protested. His work on the binary agent neutralizer is almost complete. Give me 2 more weeks. You have 3 days. My hands tightened on the microphone handle. Binary agent neutralizer. Mark had mentioned working on defense against chemical weapons, but never specifics. It was classified above my clearance level, even when I was active law enforcement. 3 days isn't enough time to... Enough. Your personal feelings are compromising the mission. My feelings are irrelevant, Sarah said, but her voice wavered slightly. I'll deliver. See that you do. Your mother's reputation protects you only so far. Through my binoculars, I watched one of the men hand Sarah an envelope. She opened it, examining the contents. Her face went pale. These are current, she asked. Taken yesterday. Your husband's laboratory security protocols, shift schedules. Everything you need. She studied what I assumed were photographs, then slipped them into her purse. The guard rotations have changed since last month. Hence why we're updating your intelligence. The extraction team arrives tomorrow night. Be ready. Extraction team. The same word from the Cyrillic notes. And the children? Sarah asked quietly. Leverage if needed. Moscow prefers a clean operation, but if the scientist resists... He won't, Sarah said quickly. I'll make sure he cooperates. One of the Russians laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Touching. The spy who fell in love with her Mark. I haven't fallen. Haven't you? 3 years of marriage, 2 children, Sunday dinners with his parents. You've gone native Svetlana. Svetlana, her real name. I know my duty, she insisted. We shall see. Your father would be disappointed. Don't speak of my father, Sarah, Svetlana, snapped, showing fire I'd never seen before. Everything I do is for his memory. Then remember how Damon Walker destroyed him. My blood froze. They knew my name. This wasn't random. It was personal. The old cop has no idea who I am, Sarah said. He treats me like a beloved daughter. The irony is delicious. No, Victor's daughter married to the son of the man who killed him. Victor. The name hit me like a sledgehammer. Victor Kozlov. Memories flooded back. 15 years ago, I'd been part of a joint task force with the FBI, hunting a Russian spy network. Victor Kozlov was their handler, brilliant and ruthless. When we finally cornered him, he chose suicide by cop, rather than capture, pulling a weapon he knew would get him killed. I was the one who took the shot. Keep focused, the lead Russian said. Personal vendettas are secondary to the mission. Deliver the formulas, and you can do whatever you wish with the Walker family after. I understand. One more thing. If you're compromised, if the old detective suspects anything... He left the threat unspoken. Sarah nodded. They spoke more in Russian before the meeting broke up. I retreated to my truck as the SUVs departed in different directions. Sarah lingered, sitting in her minivan for several minutes. Through the telephoto lens, I captured her expression. Conflicted, troubled, nothing like the cheerful daughter-in-law I knew. Finally, she drove away. I waited another 10 minutes before following my mind, processing everything I'd learned. Sarah was Victor Kozlov's daughter, trained since childhood for revenge. She'd infiltrated my family specifically to get to Mark's classified research. But something had gone wrong with her programming. The Russians were right. She had developed real feelings. The question was whether those feelings were strong enough to override years of indoctrination. I drove to a coffee shop with Wi-Fi, and spent 2 hours researching. Using old police databases I still had access to, I pieced together Svetlana Kozlova's history. After Victor's death, she and her mother had disappeared from official records. Now, I knew they'd been grooming her for this long revenge plot. The binary agent neutralizer Mark was developing could save thousands of lives if chemical weapons were deployed. In the wrong hands, it could also be reverse-engineered to create more effective chemical attacks. The Russians weren't just after revenge. They wanted a strategic advantage. My phone buzzed. Text from Sarah. "Hi, Dad. Just wanted to thank you again for picking up my coat. The boys are asking when Grandpa is visiting." The normalcy of it, the casual warmth made me nauseous knowing what I knew. I typed back, "Tomorrow afternoon. Can't wait to see them." "Perfect. I'll bake those chocolate chip cookies you love." The same cookies she'd brought to the church fundraiser last month. The same woman who'd just met with Russian intelligence officers planning to kidnap my son. I made a decision. This was too big for me to handle alone, but I couldn't go to just anyone. I scrolled through my contacts and found the number I needed: Carl Morrison, my old partner now working FBI counterintelligence. "Carl, it's Damon. I need to see you. Unofficial off the books." "Jesus, Damon, it's been 2 years. This better be good." "It's about the Kozlov case. His daughter found me." Silence on the other end, then, "How soon can you get here?" 20 minutes. "Make it 15. Use the parking garage level 3. As I drove toward the federal building, I thought about Mark, brilliant and trusting, having no idea the woman he loved was using him. I thought about Tommy and Billy, innocent pawns in a game of international espionage. And I thought about Helen, who would have to watch her family torn apart by revelations. But mostly I thought about Sarah, or Svetlana, and the war raging inside her between duty and love. In 3 days, she would have to choose. The question was whether I could stack the deck to save my family before that choice destroyed us all. The meeting with Carl lasted 3 hours. We sat in his government sedan in the federal building's parking garage engine, running for heat, while I laid out everything. The evidence, the recording, my surveillance observations. His face grew more serious with each detail. "Christ, Damon. Victor Kozlov's daughter. We always wondered what happened to the family. Now we know. They've been planning this for 15 years. Carl ran a hand through his gray hair. "I can't open an official investigation based on illegally obtained evidence. You know that. I'm not asking for official. I need resources backup and someone who can move fast when this goes sideways. When not if. These people don't leave loose ends, Carl. In 3 days, they'll either have Mark's research or they'll take him. Either way, my grandchildren are leverage." He was quiet for a long moment, then pulled out a secure phone. "I've got assets we can use off books, but we need more evidence, something actionable. What if I can get you proof of the actual extraction plan?" "How?" "I'm going to their house tomorrow. Remember grandfather visiting his grandkids?" Carl studied me. "You're going to bug your own son's house." "I'll do whatever it takes to protect them." He reached into his glove box and pulled out a small case. "These are next generation. Adhesive backing, voice-activated encrypted transmission. Plant them carefully." I pocketed the devices. "What about the poison?" "Poison. The Russians mentioned Mark's been sick lately, stressed, forgetting things. What if she's been dosing him with something?" Carl's expression darkened. "That's FSB playbook. Small doses of neurotoxins to make targets compliant. I know someone at Walter Reed who specializes in this. Get me a blood sample." "How do I?" "You were a detective for 30 years. Figure it out." After Carl dropped me back at my truck, I drove to the storage unit where I kept my old police files. Somewhere in those boxes was everything from the Kozlov case. I needed to understand the man whose daughter was now part of my family. The files painted a picture of a brilliant, ruthless operator. Victor Kozlov had run agents throughout the defense industry, stealing secrets that compromised dozens of military projects. His network had taken years to build and minutes to destroy once we identified him. The photo of his body after our confrontation was a stark reminder of how it ended. But there were also personal items in his file. Photos of a young Svetlana at 13, dark-haired and serious-eyed. A letter he'd written to his daughter, intercepted but never delivered, talking about sacrifice for the motherland. The mother, Ekaterina, described as a former ballet dancer turned intelligence analyst. These people had turned their grief into a weapon aimed at my family. I spent the rest of the day preparing. First, a visit to my army buddy, who worked at a military medical facility. He owed me favors from when I helped clear his son of false drug charges. An hour later, I had a vial of broad-spectrum antidote that would neutralize most Russian-developed neurotoxins. Next, the financial preparations. If this went bad, my family would need resources. I liquidated half my retirement fund, converting it to cash and gold coins. The other half, I used to set traps transfers that would trace back to anyone accessing them. If the Russians tried to drain our accounts, we'd know instantly. At a spy shop downtown, I purchased additional equipment: GPS trackers for vehicles, a white noise generator, and a device that detected wireless transmissions. If Sarah was communicating with her handlers from the house, I'd find out how. That evening, Helen noticed my distraction over dinner. "You've been quiet all day. Is everything all right?" I reached across the table and took her hand. "Just thinking about the boys. How fast they're growing." She smiled. "They adore you. Sarah says Tommy's been carrying around that toy police badge you gave him everywhere." "Good kid, both of them." "We're lucky Mark found Sarah. After everything with Jessica, I wasn't sure he'd trust again." Trust. Such a fragile thing, so easily shattered. I squeezed Helen's hand. "Whatever happens, remember, I love you." She laughed. "Now you're being dramatic. What's going to happen?" "Nothing, I hope. Just retirement makes a man philosophical." That night, I tested my equipment and reviewed the plan. Tomorrow's visit had to appear completely normal while accomplishing multiple objectives: plant surveillance devices, test Mark's blood for toxins, search for additional evidence, and assess Sarah's current state of mind, all without raising suspicion. I also crafted false intelligence about Mark's project technical specifications that looked legitimate, but would produce fatal flaws if implemented. If Sarah was going to steal secrets, she'd steal the wrong ones. My son's actual research would remain protected. At 3 a.m, unable to sleep again, I sat in my home office writing letters. One to Mark explaining everything in case something happened to me. One to Helen apologizing for the secrets. And one to Sarah, though I used her real name. Svetlana. I wrote, "By the time you read this, you'll have made your choice. I know about your father. I know about the pain you carry. But I also see how you look at Mark and the boys. That's not training. That's love. You don't have to complete your mother's mission. You can choose a different path. Your children deserve a mother, not a martyr to old vengeance. Choose them. Choose love. Choose the family you've built rather than the one you lost." I sealed all 3 letters and locked them in my safe. Insurance for the worst-case scenario. Dawn came too soon. I showered, dressed carefully in my usual grandfather clothes, comfortable jeans, the flannel shirt Helen bought me for Christmas, the fleece vest with multiple pockets. Each pocket now held a different device or tool. Heading to Mark's, I told Helen over breakfast. "Give the boys my love, and remind Sarah about Sunday dinner." "Will do." The drive to Mark's house took 25 minutes. I used the time to center myself, to push down the anger and fear. I needed to be Grandpa today, nothing more. The cheerful retiree who spoiled his grandkids and told bad jokes. Not the man who knew his daughter-in-law was a Russian sleeper agent. I parked in their driveway at exactly 2 p.m. Through the front window, I could see Tommy and Billy playing in the living room. They spotted my truck and started jumping up and down. Sarah appeared smiling warmly and opened the door before I could knock. "Dad, perfect timing. I just took the cookies out of the oven." She hugged me, and I forced myself to return it naturally. She smelled like vanilla and chocolate, like home and hearth, not like someone planning a kidnapping. Grandpa, Grandpa. The twins barreled into my legs, and I scooped them up, one in each arm. There's my boys, have you been good for Mommy? We helped make cookies, Billy announced proudly. I put in chocolate chips, Tommy added, not to be outdone. Well then, I definitely need to try these famous cookies. Sarah watched us with soft eyes. For a moment, I could almost believe she was just what she appeared. Then I noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way her gaze darted to the windows. She was nervous. Come in, she said. Mark's working from home today. He's in his office but said to interrupt if you arrived. Working from home. That wasn't his usual schedule. I filed that information away as I followed her inside, still carrying the boys. The house looked normal, lived in. Children's toys scattered about, family photos on the walls. Pictures of Sarah and Mark's wedding, the twins as newborns last Christmas at our house. All of it a carefully constructed lie. Or was it the complexity of the situation made my head hurt? Let me get Mark, Sarah said. Boys, show Grandpa your new building blocks. She headed down the hallway while I settled on the floor with my grandsons. They chattered about their blocks, their friends at daycare, the puppy they wanted for their birthday. Normal childhood dreams from children living in the center of an international conspiracy. Mark emerged from his office looking tired. Dark circles under his eyes, a slight tremor in his hands. The poisoning was subtle, but clear to someone looking for it. Hey, Dad. He hugged me, and I could feel he'd lost weight. Sorry, big project deadline. Haven't been sleeping well. You look exhausted, son. Maybe take a break. After this week, the DoD wants preliminary results by Friday. Friday, one day after the extraction deadline. They were cutting it close. Boys, why don't you show Daddy the tower you built? Sarah suggested. While Mark knelt with the twins, I watched Sarah move around the kitchen. She was putting on a performance, playing the devoted wife and mother. But there were tells, the way she kept checking her phone, the tremor when she poured coffee, the forced brightness in her voice. Sarah, could I use your bathroom? I asked. Of course, Dad. You know where it is. I made my way down the hall, noting the home office door was closed. In the bathroom, I quickly planted one of Carl's devices behind the mirror, then checked the medicine cabinet. Several prescription bottles in Mark's name, sleep aids, anxiety medication, antacids, all consistent with low-level poisoning symptoms. I palmed an almost empty anxiety medication bottle. Mark wouldn't miss it, and the residue inside might tell us what she'd been using. On my way back, I paused at the office door listening. No sound from inside. I tried the handle. Locked. Interesting. Back in the living room, I spent an hour playing with the boys while observing the family dynamics. Sarah was affectionate with the children, patient with their demands, gentle in her corrections. Mark responded to her with genuine love, despite his obvious fatigue. If this was all acting on her part, she deserved an Academy Award. When the boys went down for their nap, Sarah served coffee and her famous cookies. I bit into one, letting the familiar taste wash over me. How many of these had she baked for church functions? How many times had she sat at our Sunday dinner table, laughing at my stories? Mark tells me you're planning a zoo trip this weekend, she said. If the weather holds. Helen's been researching which animals the boys would enjoy most. They love the elephants. We took them last month and Tommy wouldn't leave the elephant exhibit. Mark's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and frowned. That's strange. Security says my badge was accessed after hours last night, but I haven't been to the lab since yesterday afternoon. Sarah didn't visibly react, but I caught the slight pause before she spoke. Maybe a system glitch. You said they've been updating protocols. Maybe, but Mark looked troubled. I steered the conversation to safer ground, telling stories about Mark's childhood that made Sarah laugh. She seemed to relax the mask, slipping enough to show genuine enjoyment. When she excused herself to check on the boys, I made my move. Son, you really do look tired. Have you seen a doctor? It's just stress, Dad. You know how these projects get. Your mother would say I'm being a worrywart, but humor me. Let me check your blood pressure. I pulled out the small cuff I'd brought. I've been monitoring mine since retirement. He rolled his eyes but extended his arm. While taking his pressure, I pricked his finger with the testing strip I'd hidden in my palm. Oops, sorry. Must have caught you with my ring. No problem. He absently sucked on the finger while I secured the blood sample. His blood pressure was elevated, but not dangerously so. Yet. Sarah returned carrying Billy, who'd woken early. The toddler reached for me, and I took him gladly. His weight in my arms reminded me what I was fighting for. Cookie, Billy asked hopefully. I think someone already had cookies today, Sarah said, but her tone was indulgent. One more won't hurt, I said, grandfatherly privilege in full effect. While Billy munched his cookie getting chocolate on my fleece vest, I made my final moves. A listening device under the coffee table while tying my shoe. Another in the kitchen while helping clean up. The GPS tracker would have to wait for their vehicles. I should get going, I finally said. Helen will wonder if I've moved in. The boys love having you here, Sarah said. You and Mom are welcome anytime. At the door, she hugged me again. This time, I felt her press something into my pocket. A piece of paper. Drive safely, Dad, she said, her eyes holding mine for a beat too long. I managed to wait until I was 2 blocks away before pulling over to read the note. Her handwriting careful and precise. They're watching. Tomorrow night. Please don't let them take him. My hands shook as I read it again. Sarah knew I knew, and she was asking for help. The game had just changed completely. I sat in my truck staring at Sarah's note for a full 5 minutes. She knew I was onto her, but instead of running or alerting her handlers, she was asking for help. This changed everything. Or did it? Could this be another manipulation, a deeper game? My phone buzzed. Carl. The devices are transmitting clearly. We've got ears in the house. There's been a development. I told him about the note. Silence then. Could be genuine. Could be a trap. My gut says she's conflicted. Your gut also said she was just a nice Minnesota girl who made good cookies. He had a point. What about the blood sample? Lab's running it now. Should have results in 2 hours. Damon, if she's really flipped, she could be our biggest asset. But if she hasn't... I know. It's a risk either way. There's something else. My cyber guys traced those Russian SUVs from this morning. They're registered to a shell company that rents warehouse space all over the city. We can't get warrants based on your illegal surveillance, but we're watching. How many locations? 17. These people have resources. After hanging up, I drove home to think. Helen was at her book club, giving me space to plan. I sat in my office monitoring the audio feeds from Mark's house, while reviewing everything I knew. The twins were playing again, their laughter mixing with Sarah's voice, as she helped them with a puzzle. Mark was back in his office, occasional keyboard clicks, indicating work. All perfectly normal domestic sounds, except for the context. At 4:30 my phone rang. Unknown number. Yes. The old dry cleaner was right to warn you. Sarah's voice barely above a whisper. I'm calling from the grocery store. We don't have much time. Why should I trust you? Because I love your son and your grandchildren. Because this has gone too far. Because... Her voice broke slightly. Because I'm not my father. What do you want? To save my family. My real family. The one I chose. Then tell me everything. Not over the phone. Tonight after Mark's asleep. The park where you taught Tommy to feed ducks. Come alone. If this is a trap. It's not. I'll prove it. Check your email. The line went dead. I opened my secure email to find a message from an anonymous address. Attached were documents in Russian with English translations. Extraction plans, personnel lists, communication protocols. Everything the Russians had given Sarah that morning. If this was real, she'd just signed her death warrant with her handlers. I forwarded everything to Carl with a note, insurance policy. If something happens tonight, you know where to look. The rest of the evening passed slowly. I ate dinner with Helen. watched the news, pretended everything was normal, while my mind raced through scenarios. The audio feeds showed Sarah putting the boys to bed, reading them a story about brave knights and dragons. Mark joined her for the ending, both parents doing character voices that made their sons giggle. It sounded like love, real love. At 10, Helen went to bed. I waited another hour, then slipped out. The park was empty, streetlights casting long shadows across the duck pond. I arrived early, checking sightlines and escape routes. Old habits. Sarah appeared at exactly midnight, walking quickly, constantly checking behind her. She wore dark clothes and had her hair pulled back. For the first time, I could see the trained operative beneath the suburban mom exterior. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Talk." She took a shaky breath. "My name is Svetlana Kozlova. You killed my father when I was 13. My mother spent the next decade training me for revenge. Languages, combat, seduction, psychology. Everything I needed to destroy your family from the inside. I know all that. Tell me something I don't know." I volunteered for this mission. Begged for it, actually. Mother had others in mind, but I insisted. "I wanted to see your face when you lost everything." She met my eyes. "I memorized your file. Your career, your family, your weaknesses. I knew Mark was divorced vulnerable. I orchestrated our meeting at that medical conference. And everything went according to plan. He fell in love quickly. You and Helen welcomed me without suspicion. The wedding, the house access to his work. Even the twins were part of the strategy cementing my place in the family." But her composure cracked. "But I didn't expect to fall in love with him. Real love. Not the performance I was trained for. Mark is. He's nothing like the monster I imagined your son would be. He's kind and brilliant and terrible at jokes, and he sings to the boys when he thinks no one can hear." Tears ran down her face. I stayed silent. "I didn't expect you and Helen either. You treated me like a daughter. Real warmth, not suspicion. Sunday dinners where you told embarrassing stories about Mark's childhood. Helen teaching me her mother's recipes. You don't know what that meant to someone who grew up in training facilities and safe houses. So why continue the mission? Because my mother holds my leash. Because saying no means death. Because they have leverage." She pulled out her phone and showed me a picture. An elderly woman in what looked like a Russian hospital bed. My grandmother. The only person who showed me kindness growing up. They'll kill her if I fail. There's always a choice, Svetlana. Is there? Would you choose your principles over Helen's life? I didn't answer. We both knew I wouldn't. The extraction team arrives tomorrow night, she continued. 12 operatives. They'll take Mark, force him to recreate his research in Moscow. If he refuses, they'll use the boys as leverage. We'll stop them. She shook her head. You don't understand. These aren't thugs. They're Spetsnaz trained, and they know you're aware of something. My handler mentioned your name specifically today. Then we need to be smarter. What do they expect? Me to drug Mark heavily tomorrow night. They'll enter through the basement access I've prepared. Quick and quiet extraction to a medical transport, then to a private airfield. What if Mark wasn't there? She looked confused. What? Think about it. If something spooked you enough to grab the kids and run, Mark would go with you. Empty house when they arrive. They'd hunt us down. Not if they thought they'd succeeded. Not if they had what they came for. I pulled out the false research data I'd prepared. Mark's formulas. Convincing enough to pass initial inspection, flawed enough to be useless. She studied the documents. This could work, but they'd expect Mark too. And me. Then we give them bodies. Her eyes widened. You're not suggesting CPR dummies from the police training center. In the dark, drugged up for transport, they'd pass long enough. By the time they realize the switch, you're all in protective custody. My grandmother, Carl Morrison, FBI. He can arrange extraction for her within hours. Diplomatic channels, medical emergency. We've done it before with Soviet defectors. For the first time since she'd arrived, Sarah showed hope. You'd do this after everything I came here to destroy you. But you didn't. You became family instead. I surprised myself with the truth of it. Those boys call me Grandpa. Mark loves you. Hell, Helen would adopt you officially if she could. That means something. I don't deserve. Nobody deserves family. We choose it. Question is, which family are you choosing? She was quiet for a long moment, then pulled out a second phone. This connects directly to my handler. One code word, and the mission aborts. But they'll know I've turned. Then we'd better make sure our trap works. We spent the next hour planning. Sarah provided inside intelligence entry points, team composition, communication protocols. I shared Carl's resources and my own preparations. Together, we built a deception that might save everyone. The house needs to look normal tomorrow, I said. Can you perform one more day? I've been performing for 3 years. One more day won't kill me. She paused. What about Mark? When do we tell him? After. He can't know, can't react differently. His life depends on his ignorance for now. He'll hate me when he learns the truth. He'll be alive to hate you. That's what matters. She nodded, wiping away fresh tears. I should go. Staying out too long will raise suspicions. Sarah. Svetlana. What do I call you? I haven't been Svetlana since the day I married Mark. That girl died at the altar. I'm Sarah Walker, mother of 2 baker of cookies, terrible at poker, and hopelessly in love with a man who quotes Star Wars too much. She managed a weak smile. I choose this family. Then welcome to the family. Really this time. She hugged me suddenly fiercely. I'm sorry about your father, I said quietly. He made his choices. You're making different ones. Thank you, she whispered, then pulled away. Tomorrow night. Be ready. I watched her disappear into the darkness, then called Carl. We're on. I need resources, bodies, and a miracle. Which do you want first? The miracle. We're going to need it. The next 24 hours would determine everything. Save my family or lose them all. But now, I had an ally on the inside, one who'd chosen love over revenge. Sometimes, that's the only miracle you need. The next day dawned crisp and clear. I played the role of normal retiree morning coffee with Helen, a trip to the hardware store, lunch at our usual diner, all while coordinating the most complex operation of my life through encrypted messages. Carl had moved mountains overnight. His team secured 2 CPR dummies from the training facility, complete with heaters to simulate body temperature. An FBI safe house was prepared 40 miles north. Most crucially, a discreet medical evacuation was arranged for Sarah's grandmother in Moscow, scheduled for 1 hour after our operation began. Your blood work came back, Carl told me during a brief phone call. Sophisticated cocktail. Low-dose neurotoxin that mimics chronic fatigue syndrome. Another 6 months, and the damage would be permanent. Antidote. Already delivered to the house. Sarah knows to dose his coffee tonight. By afternoon, everything was in place. I made one last visit to Mark's house, ostensibly to return a borrowed tool. Sarah answered the door with the boys maintaining perfect normalcy. Only the slight tremor in her hands betrayed her tension. Grandpa. Tommy rushed forward with Billy close behind. I lifted them both, memorizing their weight, their laughter, the way they smelled like graham crackers, and childhood. Hey there, troublemakers. Being good for Mommy. We're always good, Billy said solemnly, then ruined it by giggling. Mark appeared from his office looking marginally better. The antidote was already working. Dad twice in 2 days were honored. Just returning your socket wrench. Helen's making pot roast tomorrow if you're free. Wouldn't miss it, Mark said. Sarah's expression flickered, knowing tomorrow's dinner would happen in an FBI safe house, not our dining room. I stayed just long enough to seem normal, planting the last GPS tracker on Sarah's minivan, while admiring the boys' sidewalk chalk art. As I left, Sarah pressed another note into my hand. 10:47 p.m. Basement door unlocked. The rest of the afternoon, I prepped our substitutes. The dummies were dressed in Mark and Sarah's clothes, fitted with wigs that would pass in darkness. Small speakers would play recorded breathing sounds. In the chaos of extraction, they should buy us crucial minutes. Helen noticed my distraction over dinner. "You're somewhere else tonight." "Just thinking about the boys. Time goes so fast." She reached across the table. "They're lucky to have you. Mark too. Sarah told me how much your visits mean to them." Guilt twisted in my stomach. Helen deserved the truth, but not yet. Not until everyone was safe. At 9:30, I left for my evening walk. Carl's team was already in position using houses the FBI had quietly evacuated that afternoon. Surveillance showed 12 operatives in 3 vehicles approaching the neighborhood. "They're early." Carl's voice crackled through my earpiece. "Moving to positions around the house." I watched from my concealed position as Sarah played her part perfectly. Through the windows, we could see her bringing Mark a cup of tea, sitting with him on the couch. At 10:15, Mark yawned heavily. By 10:30, he was unconscious from the sedative she'd added. Sarah half carried him to the bedroom, then returned to wait. At exactly 10:47, she unlocked the basement door. The extraction team moved like ghosts. Black-clad figures flowed into the house with practiced efficiency. Through my night vision scope, I watched them advance to the master bedroom, where our dummies waited. 2 packages secured. I heard through their intercepted communications. Both sedated as expected. They carried the wrapped figures out quickly. No hesitation or inspection. In the darkness bundled in sheets, the dummies passed perfectly. The team loaded them into a medical transport van and departed. The entire operation took less than 4 minutes. "They're clear," Carl reported. "Tail team following to the airfield." Now came the critical part. I entered through the basement, finding Sarah sitting on her kitchen floor, shaking. The performance was over, reality crashing in. "You did it," I said. "They bought it completely." "Mark," she asked. "Still sedated. We need to move now." Carl's team entered efficiently, packing essential items, while I helped Sarah gather the boys. They woke confused, but trusting, clinging to their mother, as she carried them to the waiting SUV. Mark was loaded on a stretcher, still unconscious. Better he wake in safety than confusion. As we prepared to leave, Sarah grabbed a photo album from the shelf. "Real memories," she said quietly. "Not the lies." The convoy moved out quickly. I rode with Sarah and the boys, watching her hold them close. 20 minutes into the drive, her handler called the burner phone. She answered in Russian, then switched to English. "Yes, I'm en route to the airfield. No complications. I'll report when we land." After hanging up, she powered off the phone and removed the battery. "That buys us time. They won't expect communication during the flight." We reached the safe house, a farmhouse surrounded by federal agents. Mark was carried inside, starting to stir. Sarah looked at me with terrified eyes. "I can't. When he wakes up, when he knows—" "You saved his life, remember that." But when Mark's eyes opened an hour later, his first word was, "Sarah," with such trust that she broke down completely. Carl and I gave them privacy for the revelation. We could hear Mark's voice rise in shock, then anger, then deadly quiet, as she explained everything. I busied myself with the boys, trying to distract them with toys the FBI had provided. They kept asking for Mommy and Daddy, too young to understand their world had shattered. Finally, Mark emerged, face haggard. "Dad, I need air." We walked outside where dawn was breaking. He stood silent for a long time, then suddenly punched the fence post. Once, twice, until his knuckles bled. 3 years. Our entire marriage. The boys. All of it built on lies. "Not all of it," I said carefully. Her feelings became real. "How can you defend her? She came to destroy us." "But she didn't. When it counted, she chose you." "That doesn't erase the betrayal." His voice broke. "I loved her, Dad. God help me, I still do. How pathetic is that?" "Love isn't pathetic. It's what saved us all." He laughed bitterly. Did it? My wife is a Russian spy. My children are… What props in her cover story? Your children are innocent boys who need both parents. Whatever else Sarah did, she loves those kids. Like she loved me. Ask yourself this. Would someone playing a role risk everything to save you? Would they betray their own people, guarantee a death sentence from their handlers to keep you safe? Mark was quiet processing. Inside the house, we could hear Billy crying for his mother. The sound seemed to break something in Mark. The boys can't lose her, he said quietly. Whatever she's done, they need their mother. And you? I don't know. I can't think beyond the next minute right now. Carl appeared, phone in hand. We have a problem. Moscow knows. They're mobilizing resources and the grandmother's building is surrounded. We can't extract her. Sarah had been listening from the doorway. The last color drained from her face. They'll kill her. Maybe not, I said. Not if they think they still have leverage. What are you suggesting? I looked at Carl. How quickly can you produce a convincing death scene? 2 hours later, news channels reported a terrible accident. Prominent defense contractor Mark Walker, his wife and father had died in a house fire. Dental records would confirm the identities. The twin boys at a sleepover with their grandmother were the only survivors. In Moscow, Sarah's grandmother received a visitor. The message was simple. Svetlana had died completing her mission, a hero to the motherland. The boys would be raised by the other grandmother, Helen Walker. A tragic end to a successful operation. Think they'll buy it? Sarah asked, watching the news report from the safe house. Long enough, Carl said. By the time they realize the truth, you'll all have new identities, new lives. Together, Mark asked, speaking to Sarah for the first time in hours. That's up to you, she replied. I know I have no right to ask. You're right. You don't. His voice was cold. Then he looked at the boys playing on the floor. But they do. We'll figure this out. For them. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a beginning. The reversal was complete. The hunters had become the hunted. The trap had sprung on those who set it. But the real reversal was in Sarah's heart, where love had conquered a lifetime of training for revenge. Sometimes the greatest victory is choosing not to fight. The federal courthouse in Alexandria was a fortress of marble and metal. 6 months had passed since our midnight escape, 6 months of new identities and relocated lives. But today, Sarah walked through those doors as herself, ready to face judgment. I sat in the gallery with Helen, who'd forgiven my deception with her usual grace. Mark was in the witness section, their divorce papers filed, but not finalized. The boys were with Helen's sister in Oregon, protected from this final chapter of their mother's past. Sarah looked small at the defendant's table, but her voice was strong as she detailed 17 years of Russian intelligence operations. Names, dates, locations, methods. Each revelation sent ripples through the intelligence community. Her information had already led to 23 arrests across the country. I betrayed my country of birth, she testified. But I chose my country of heart. I chose my family. The prosecutor pushed hard on her deceptions, the 3 years of lies. But when Mark took the stand, something shifted. She saved my life, he said simply. Whatever her original intentions, she chose us when it mattered. The sentence was 10 years minimum security, with possibility of early release for continued cooperation. Sarah took it without flinching. As they led her away, she looked back once. Mark nodded slightly. Not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. Progress. Outside the courthouse, Mark stood apart from us, struggling with emotions. Take care of them, he said finally. The boys need stability while I figure this out. You're their father, I reminded him. That hasn't changed. Everything's changed. He looked at the courthouse steps where Sarah had walked. I'm seeing a therapist, trying to separate the real from the lies. Some days I hate her. Other days, you remember why you loved her. She made me laugh. Even now, knowing everything, I remember her terrible puns and how she'd steal bites of my dessert and claim innocence. His voice cracked. How do I reconcile that woman with the spy who targeted me? Maybe they're both real, Helen said gently. People are complicated. We drove Mark to his new apartment near Quantico, where he'd taken a position with FBI counterintelligence. His expertise, combined with his unwitting insider knowledge of Russian methods, made him invaluable. It gave him purpose while he rebuilt. That evening, Helen and I sat with the boys as they video called their mother. The prison allowed weekly family calls carefully monitored. Sarah's face lit up, seeing them hearing about their kindergarten adventures. She never asked about Mark, but I saw her eyes search the background hoping. "Mommy, when are you coming home?" Billy asked. "Not for a while, sweetheart, but I think about you every day." "We're making you pictures," Tommy added. "Grandma helps us mail them." After the call, I found Tommy crying quietly in his room. At 5, he understood more than his brother. "Why can't Mommy live with us?" "How do you explain international espionage to a kindergartner?" I held him close. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes and have to face consequences. But Mommy loves you, and that's never been a lie." The next weeks brought unexpected developments. Sarah's intelligence led to the capture of her handler and the dismantling of a network that had operated for decades. Her mother, Ekaterina Kozlova, was arrested in Moscow and charged with treason by the Russian government, who disavowed the entire operation. But the biggest surprise came from an encrypted message Sarah managed to send from prison. "Check the cedar tree in your backyard, 3 feet down, for the boys." Carl's team excavated carefully, finding a waterproof container. Inside were documents Sarah had hidden 2 years ago, evidence of her growing doubts, journal entries about falling in love with Mark, and a confession written the day the twins were born. I was sent to destroy, but I found something to build instead. If something happens to me, know that every smile was real, every laugh genuine. The mission became my cover story. The family became my truth. There was also a USB drive containing intelligence she'd gathered on other operations, insurance she'd kept against her handlers. The information proved invaluable to national security. Mark read everything twice, then sat in his car outside the prison for 3 hours before driving away without visiting. But the next week, his name appeared on Sarah's visitor list. Helen and I didn't ask about that first visit. Mark volunteered nothing except, we talked, about the boys mostly. But something had shifted in him, a slight easing of the constant tension he'd carried. The boys adapted as children do, with resilience that amazed us. They attended a new school under their protective identities, made friends, played soccer. Normal childhood milestones against an abnormal backdrop. Sarah used her time productively, earning her GED, then starting college courses. She taught Russian to federal agents in training, consulted on counterintelligence operations, and wrote detailed reports that would reshape American understanding of modern spycraft. 1 year into her sentence, Mark brought the boys for their first in-person visit. I drove them, staying in the waiting room while they went inside. 2 hours later, they emerged. The boys chatted excitedly about showing Mommy their report cards. Mark said nothing, but his eyes were red. "Progress?" I asked carefully. "I don't know what to call it," he admitted. "But the boys need their mother even like this." The visits became monthly. Mark would take the boys in, sometimes staying himself, sometimes waiting outside. Slowly, incrementally, something began to rebuild. Not trust exactly, but perhaps understanding. Sarah's grandmother passed away peacefully in a Moscow nursing home, never knowing the truth about her granddaughter's choices. Sarah grieved quietly, another casualty of the life she'd left behind. 2 years into the sentence, Sarah's early release was approved. Model prisoner, invaluable intelligence asset, genuine remorse. But freedom came with conditions: lifetime monitoring, restricted movement, regular check-ins. She'd never truly be free, but she could be a mother again. The night before her release, Mark sat in our kitchen wrestling with decision. "I've rented a house," he said finally. 2 bedrooms for the boys' pull-out couch in the living room. For Sarah. For co-parenting. Nothing more. I don't know if I'll ever trust her completely again. But the boys deserve both parents. And she's proven she'll sacrifice everything for them. That's generous of you. It's practical. The therapist says the boys need stability routine. This provides that. He paused. And maybe I need to see who she really is without the lies. What about Grace? I asked, referring to the woman he'd been cautiously dating. We ended it. She deserves someone who isn't carrying this much baggage. He smiled sadly. Turns out dating is complicated when your ex-wife is a reformed Russian spy in federal prison. The next morning, we waited outside the prison. Sarah emerged carrying one small bag, all her possessions. She'd entered as Svetlana Kozlova's weapon. She left as Sarah Walker, mother and federal asset. The boys ran to her, and she dropped to her knees, holding them like life preservers. Mark stood back, watchful, but not cold. When she looked up at him, something passed between them. Not forgiveness, not yet, but possibility. Thank you, she said simply. For them, he replied, indicating the boys. Always for them. The reckoning was far from over. There would be supervised visits with federal handlers, polygraph tests, ongoing intelligence debriefings. Sarah would live under a microscope, every action scrutinized. But she was free to be a mother again, to build something real on the ashes of deception. As we drove away from the prison, Tommy and Billy chattering excitedly about showing Mommy their rooms, I thought about the strange paths life takes. Viktor Kozlov had raised a weapon aimed at my family. Instead, we'd gained a daughter who chose love over vengeance, who proved that people could change, could choose better. The reckoning wasn't just Sarah's. We'd all been judged and found worthy of a second chance. Sometimes that's the best justice of all. 5 years had passed since that night Sarah warned me about the extraction team. The autumn sun filtered through the windows of my house as we prepared for Thanksgiving dinner. The dining room table was extended to its fullest set for 12. Family had a way of growing when you weren't looking. Tommy, now 12, helped Helen with the turkey, while Billy, also 12, set the table with military precision. They'd grown into thoughtful young men, shaped by experiences that would have broken many children. Instead, they'd developed a deep empathy and understanding of complex choices. Grandpa, Mom says you need to check the garage, Tommy said. Dad's trying to deep fry a turkey again. I groaned. Mark's annual attempt at culinary innovation. On it. In the garage, Mark stood before his turkey fryer safety gear, making him look like a hazmat technician. Grace handed him tools, laughing at his over-preparation. They'd found their way back to each other 2 years ago, when Mark had finally processed enough to try again. She knew everything, and chose him anyway. Need help, son? Got it under control, Mark said, then grinned. Probably. Sarah appeared with 5-year-old Lisa, who'd inherited her mother's dark hair and her father's analytical mind. The little girl clutched a doll babushka Helen had given her. Sarah had chosen the name Lisa Hope during a prison visit, saying it represented new beginnings for all of them. Mark Anderson, if you burn down the garage, you're sleeping in it, Sarah called out. Love you too. He responded automatically, then caught himself. That was new, the casual affection that had crept back over years of careful rebuilding. Not the passionate love of their early marriage, but something tested by fire and consciously chosen. They lived in the same house now, separate bedrooms, but unified in parenting. Co-parents who'd become friends again, then something more. Not quite spouses, but far more than strangers. Mark called it intentional family, choosing each day to forgive a little more, trust a little deeper. The doorbell rang. Carl Morrison arrived with his wife and the FBI handler who still checked on Sarah monthly. Even oversight had become family tradition. Behind them came Mr. Petrosky, now 85, and honorary grandfather to all the children. He'd closed his dry cleaning shop but never missed our gatherings. "I brought pierogies," he announced. "Helen asked special." "You spoil us," Helen said, hugging him carefully. Age had made him frail, but his eyes still sparkled with the alertness that had saved us all. We gathered around the table, an unlikely family forged by crisis. Sarah sat between her children, Mark on her other side. Their wedding rings were gone, but they wore matching simple bands on their right hands. Promise rings, Lisa had explained seriously, because Mommy and Daddy promised to always be a family, even if things were complicated. "Before we eat," I said, standing, "I want to share something." Everyone looked at me expectantly. I pulled out a letter worn from 5 years of keeping. This is what I wrote the night I learned who Sarah really was. I never sent it, but I think it's time. I unfolded the paper and read, "Svetlana, by the time you read this, you'll have made your choice. I know about your father. I know about the pain you carry. But I also see how you look at Mark and the boys. That's not training. That's love. You don't have to complete your mother's mission. You can choose a different path. Your children deserve a mother, not a martyr to old vengeance. Choose them. Choose love. Choose the family you've built, rather than the one you lost." Sarah wiped tears from her eyes. "You wrote that before you knew I'd turn—" "I hoped. That's what family does, we hope for each other, even when logic says otherwise." "My turn," Mark said unexpectedly. He stood looking at Sarah. 5 years ago, my world shattered. Everything I believed was built on lies. But watching you these years, seeing you choose us again and again, facing consequences with grace, I realized something. The lies were what brought you to us, but the love was always real. He pulled out a small box. Inside were 2 rings, simple gold bands. "I'm not proposing," he said quickly. "We're not ready for that. Maybe we never will be. But these are acknowledgement rings, acknowledging what we've built from the ashes, what we continue to build, if you'll wear it." Sarah's hand shook as she took the ring. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure that you're the mother of my children. I'm sure that you saved my life. I'm sure that we're better together than apart. The rest we'll figure out as we go." She slipped on the ring, then placed the matching one on his finger. Not a wedding, but a different kind of promise. The boys cheered. Lisa clapped without fully understanding why everyone was crying. "Well," Carl said, raising his glass, "here's to the most unusual family I've ever had the privilege to surveil." Laughter broke the emotional tension. We settled into dinner conversations flowing across the table. Sarah helped Lisa cut her turkey, while discussing a translation project with Grace. The boys pestered Carl for FBI stories. Helen and Mrs. Morrison compared grandchildren photos. After dinner, while the kids played and adults cleaned, I found myself on the back porch with Sarah. The federal ankle monitor was gone, her movements no longer restricted, though she'd never be truly free of oversight. "Do you regret it?" I asked. "The path that led here?" "I regret the lies, the pain I caused, the 3 years of deception." She paused. "But not the destination. This family, these children, the chance to choose differently than my parents. No, I don't regret that." "Your father would hate what you've become." "Good." Her voice was firm. "He chose vengeance over life. I choose life over vengeance. My children will never carry the poison of inherited hatred." Tommy appeared in the doorway. "Mom, Dad says it's time for pie. He also says to tell Grandpa his deep-fried turkey was actually pretty good this year." "Minor miracle," I muttered, making Sarah laugh. Inside, the family had gathered in the living room. Mr. Petrosky sat in the place of honor, the boys at his feet, as he told stories of escaping Soviet control. His warning had started everything, the thread that unraveled a web of lies and rebuilt it as truth. "Mr. P," Billy said, "were you scared when you warned Grandpa?" "Terrified," the old man admitted, "but more scared of saying nothing. When you see danger to good people, you speak. His only choice." "Even if it's dangerous?" Tommy asked. Especially then, courage isn't absence of fear, is doing right thing despite fear. I caught Sarah's eye. She'd learned that lesson the hard way, choosing her family over her training when it mattered most. The cost had been high, prison, constant monitoring, the weight of her past. But the reward sat around her children who knew they were loved, a partner who chose forgiveness, extended family who embraced her despite everything. As the evening wound down, Mark stood with Sarah to get the kids ready for bed. They moved with practiced coordination, Lisa on Mark's shoulders, the boys helping gather belongings. Sarah's hand briefly touched Mark's back as she passed a casual intimacy, rebuilt grain by grain. "Same time next year?" Carl asked, as his wife bundled Mr. Petrosky into their car for the ride home. "Wouldn't miss it," I confirmed. One by one, the guests departed. Mark and Sarah's family was last, Lisa asleep in Mark's arms. At the door, Sarah hugged Helen and me tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for believing in who I could become." "Thank you," I replied, "for becoming it." As their car pulled away, Helen took my hand. "Strange journey to get here." "The best journeys usually are." We stood in our doorway, watching taillights disappear. Somewhere in Moscow, Ekaterina Kozlova sat in prison. Her empire of vengeance collapsed. Her daughter had broken the cycle, choosing creation over destruction. The Walkers and Kozlovs, bound by tragedy, had transformed into something new, a family that chose itself. That night, lying beside Helen, I thought about the threads that connect us. How a dry cleaner's warning had exposed a spy, but also revealed a woman trapped between worlds. How my decision to trust, rather than simply arrest, had opened a path to redemption. How love, real love, could grow even in deception's shadow. The great lesson wasn't about international espionage or clever plots. It was simpler: families aren't just born, they're built. Built through choice, maintained through forgiveness, strengthened through trials. Sarah had come to destroy us, but ended up completing us in ways we never expected. Viktor Kozlov had been wrong. Vengeance wasn't strength. It was poison passed to the next generation. True strength was Mark choosing to forgive Sarah, choosing to change all of us, choosing to build rather than burn. As sleep took me, I smiled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Sarah still met with federal handlers. Mark still struggled some days. The boys carried unique burdens. But we'd face it together, this strange, wonderful chosen family of ours. The dry cleaner's coat still hung in our closet, never returned, a reminder of the day everything changed. But now, it represented not danger, but deliverance. Not the end of our family, but its transformation into something stronger, deeper, more intentional than blood alone could create. In choosing each other, we'd all found our way home. A question for all of you watching. Have you ever had to make a choice between vengeance and forgiveness? How did that decision shape your family? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more tales of families who choose love over revenge. Share this with someone who needs to hear that redemption is always possible, that families can be rebuilt even from the deepest betrayals. Thank you for joining our family's journey. May your own holidays be filled with chosen family second chances and the courage to transform pain into purpose. Until next time, remember, the greatest gifts can't be wrapped, only chosen, forgiven, and cherished.